Good morning. The Elementary and Secondary Education Committee will now come to order. Please call the roll.
Chairman Basie.
Present.
Vice Chairman Hafner. Here. Representatives Brown. Here. Baker. Here. Bangert. Here. Black. Here. Cristofanelli. Davidson. DeGroat. Here. Dogan. Fischel. Here. Grier. Hicks. Mackey. Nurnberg. Here. Patterson. Here. Pollitt. Sharp, Stacy, Terry, Tosin Reich. I'm sorry, 12 present.
Okay, we have 12 members present. We do have a quorum. We'll now go into executive session. And I move that House Bill 1770 be voted do pass. Any discussion? I do have a substitute. It's been distributed, and I move for its adoption. Any discussion on the substitute? Representative Pollitt.
Is it time for the amendment, sir?
Go ahead.
I have an amendment in .01H. It has been distributed. I move for its adoption.
Okay, Representative Pollitt's moved for the adoption of House Committee Amendment Number 1. You want to go ahead and explain what the amendment does, sir?
Yeah, it just simply adds preschool teachers to the bill.
Okay, and you've talked to the sponsor and everything's okay?
I did talk to the sponsor. I talked to the budget director as well. It's originally his bill, and everybody was good with that, as well as the committee chair.
Okay, any other discussion on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of adopting House Committee Amendment Number 1 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. And the ayes have it. I now move that we roll the amendment into a new substitute and adopt the substitute. Any discussion? Representative Brown.
So I've been working with the bill sponsor. I'm still a no at this point, but I think some good amendments are going to come on the floor, so I hope to see us to follow that through.
Okay, sounds good. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of adopting the new substitute signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. And the ayes have it. You've adopted the substitute. I now move that House Committee substitute for House Bill 1770 be adopted. Be voted to pass. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Chairman Basie.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Hafner. Excuse me. Representatives Brown. No. Baker. Aye. Bangert. No. Black. Aye. Cristofanelli. Davidson. DeGroat. Aye. Dogan. Fischel. Aye. Grier. Hicks. Mackey. No. I'm sorry. Thank you. Nurnberg. No. Patterson. Aye. Pollitt. Aye. Sharp. No. Stacy. Aye. Terry. No. Tosin Reich.
By your vote of 9 ayes and 6 noes, you've adopted House Committee, or you voted do pass House Committee substitute for House Bill 1770. We'll now leave executive session and we'll now go to public hearing, and we're going to start with Representative Hurlbert's House Bill 2211. You can begin when you're ready, sir.
All right. Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Rep. Josh Hurlbert, representing the 12th District, Clay and Platte counties. It's the Northland part of Kansas City. And it's that last county, Platte County, is why I'm here presenting this bill. HB 2211 would expand the Missouri Scholars Program, the empowerment scholarship accounts that we passed out of this body last year, into all counties with 100,000 or more population. It's a simple 9-word bill that fixes concerns I've heard from my constituents in Platte County. Fortunately, 6 months before the Most Scholars program was passed into law, Clay County voters approved a charter form of government, allowing every student in Clay County the ability to find the organization that best fits their educational needs, granted that they meet the other eligibility criteria included in the bill. Pike County is not under a charter, so half the county that is within Kansas City city limits are eligible for the program, while those outside of KCMO are not. Their educational opportunities remain tied to their family's income and their zip code. This is true for the 10,093 Pike County residents that I am honored to represent down here. They do not have access to this program and have asked me to present a bill that grants them access to this. My hope is that this legislation, that we can increase outcomes and expand educational opportunities to the rest of my district. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Brown. Go ahead.
Morning.
Morning.
So this is the scholarship program we voted in last year. Has it even gotten up and running?
Rules have been proposed, but no, it is not fully operational this time.
Is there one child benefiting from it yet?
At this point in time, no, no one's has had access to it.
And so walk me through what your constituents are saying.
Well, what my constituents are telling me is that, if they lived on one side of a county line, they're eligible, but they're on the other side of the county line, they're not. Platte County is not that different from Clay County. It's still very suburban. It's a Kansas City metro area. There's not much different between the two of them, except that Clay County has a charter government now that isn't even operational yet either. It's been voted in, but it has not been fully implemented. But because of that vote, they now are eligible for this program, while those on the Platte County side do not have access to being able to take advantage of this program.
Do you remember why the representative didn't include these other places last year in his bill?
I think overall there was a hope to make sure that the rural parts of our state were not quite as affected by this. I tend to think that we can make sure that that statewide this would work, but that was not the vote, and that was not the bill in front of us. So Platte County, I struggle to call Platte County exactly rural. It has 106,000 people in it, and again, at 53,000 of those live within Kansas City city limits. Those folks actually have access to this program when it becomes operational this fall, but the rest of the county does not, and this fixes that.
Okay, well, I'll be hard-pressed to vote on a program that we don't even know how it works yet. So thank you very much.
Representative Nurnberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to comment on the legislation, I want to echo the concerns from Representative Brown. One of the things that we heard about quite frequently last year were simply concerns as how this program would be rolled out. As she said, this isn't even operational yet, but now we are seeking to expand that program, a program that we don't know how well it's going to be able to serve our students who have an IEP, a program we don't know if students who are going to take this voucher are even going to be able to afford to attend the parochial school. So I think, since it did get through, and obviously it is the process is being worked out now, I think it's really important that we look at this as a pilot program. And once we have some information back, we can really dig into whether it is effective. If students are able to use those funds in a way that serves all students and all families. And that is why I'm going to oppose this legislation. I have grave concerns of us expanding something that we simply do not know if it is going to even be effective in educating our students. Thank you.
Any other questions for the representative? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
First witness in support of House Bill 2211.
I was excited to hear about the scholarship program when me and my wife first heard about it. And then come to find out that since we live right outside the city limits, we're not eligible for it, even though we are in that district. I think it's hard to see the benefits of a program that hasn't been implemented yet. From what I know is that It's going to start at the beginning of next year, so it hasn't affected any children yet because it just hasn't started. So I want to be in favor of expanding it outside the city limits because it just doesn't make any sense that my family doesn't qualify for it when literally somebody right down the block does. So please take that in consideration. There's a lot of parents that I've talked to as well that fit in this category as well.
Thanks, Mr. Potter. I just wanted to comment when they SEAM had that event at the Arc in Columbia. I attended that night to talk about the new legislation that passed, and there were quite a few people there that were very disappointed when the details came out, and they were, like you, were excluded from the new opportunity. So
And that was the exact same thing that happened. We had another informational meeting in Jeff City too, as well.
Right.
Just last week. So
yeah, it's
there was
probably a
parents
pretty
there as well
common
that were-
problem for a lot of parents, I bet.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, well, thank you for being here. Representative Stacy.
I just wanted to clarify, did you say that you don't live in the city of Kansas City?
I live right outside the city of Columbia.
Oh, okay, I'm
So I
sorry.
don't live inside the city limits.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the gentleman? Thank you very much, sir. Is there anyone here in opposition to House Bill 2211?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Mike Wood, representing the Missouri State Teachers Association. And just like many have said, we're expanding a program that hasn't been up and running. The other comment I would make is I think it's more than just one county we're expanding it to. I think I was reading in the fiscal note where Franklin County is now included. I happen to be a resident of Franklin County, and I think that got swept in under this legislation as well. If I'm correct under that, it wasn't in the original bill, and now it would be included in the bill as well. So I think it's just more than just one county that got swept in, as the sponsor of the legislation seemed to insinuate.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Wood? Thank you. Anyone here for informational purposes only? Next witness in support of the bill. Any other in opposition? Anyone else here to testify on House Bill 2211? Seeing none, that'll conclude the public hearing on House Bill 2211. We'll now go to Representative Baker. Can you take over, please? House Bill 1933.
We will now move to public hearing, or not public hearing, but the bill sponsor's presentation of House Bill 1933. Please proceed, Representative Basie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Representative Chuck Basie from District 47 in Central Missouri. Before I get into the bill, I want to explain kind of the background on this. A year or so ago, I was contacted by a gentleman on the East Coast named Dr. Matt Daniels, and what he was trying to do was to come in contact with the Commissioner of Education, Dr. Van Dieven, and some other folks in state government to try and advance what this bill is all about. So we kind of went back and forth, emails, phone conversations. He wasn't having any luck talking to the department. So in a conversation last year, and I can't remember exactly when it was, I suggested that maybe we had to try legislation. So it's something he hadn't thought about, but so that's where we're at now. So Dr. Daniels is a professor at a small university in Washington, D.C. It's called the Institute for World Politics. It is a graduate university, and they cater to government agencies for the most part, from what I've read on their website. So this gentleman is working with a lot of groups, civil rights groups across the country, including former Ambassador Andrew Young. And so there's a lot of groups that are getting behind this legislation. That it is advancing in Georgia and I think a few other states, but offhand I don't know what is going on. So the background on this is there's a lot of concern about things that have happened in recent past where protests are occurring and then a lot of violence breaks out and communities are torn up and just a lot of damage being done. So what Dr. Daniels and his colleagues are wanting to do is embrace the philosophies of Dr. Martin Luther King and peaceful protest. So that's kind of the genesis of the legislation. And so this would require the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to develop curriculum and put this in our public school systems across the state. So that's kind of the background of it, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions if anybody has any. So,
Questions for the representative? Yes. Representative Brown, proceed.
Mr. Chair. Morning.
morning.
So I can appreciate the topics, but typically we don't legislate curriculum. We do legislate standards. So my first question is, do these match the standards in our social studies?
I honestly don't know, but I could find out. But
Okay.
again, this was just an idea that came forth because he was trying to get a conversation going with the department and just wasn't making any headway. So I suggested this, and so that's kind of where we're at now. So he's did he reach out to you? Because I gave him your name and number.
No.
Okay, but he's a very interesting fella. He got a very, very interesting background of where he grew up in Spanish Harlem and single mother, and some very bad things happened to her in his young childhood. So to consider where he came from and where he is now, it's pretty impressive, and that's my opinion. So anyway, he's got a lot of very good ideas, in my opinion, and so that's where we're at now. I'm not trying to force anything on anybody, but I'm trying to work with this gentleman, and I'm going to realize this probably won't happen this year, but it's something that he and I both felt would be a good idea to get in front of some folks that might be able to affect some change in Missouri.
Okay, so I believe that those are absolute topics we should be discussing in schools, but I also believe that curriculum is developed locally. It worries me when we start to step into the classroom. So I hope to have further conversation about this.
Right, and if you look at the very back part of the bill, it does say that they shall make the curriculum available to school districts beginning 2023-24, but it does go on to say that each school district shall determine a minimum amount of instruction time that qualifies as a unit of instruction. So there's some flexibility in that regard, and again, I'm open to any changes that would make sense on this too.
Okay, so just correct me if I'm wrong. So what you want is the department to create a curriculum and then offer it.
Right.
But not require it.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention, McGraw-Hill has worked with Dr. Daniels, and they've got curriculum ready, and it's available, I believe, so.
Okay.
I have not looked at it. He sent it to me, but I haven't had time to look at it, so, but.
If I could look at that would be great.
Yeah, I think I probably ought to forward a lot of the information he sent to me to the committee and let you all look at it. Anyway, this has also been endorsed by the Martin Luther King Commission in Colorado as well. So it's starting to get in front of some groups across the country. So,
Okay, thank you so much.
Further questions for the bill sponsor? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. We'll now move to public hearing on House Bill 1933. Is there anyone here to testify in favor of the bill? Seeing none, anyone to testify in opposition? Yes, please come forward. Just want to make sure everyone who testifies fills out a witness form and turns that in. Thank you. Please proceed. Make sure you turn your microphone on as well.
Thank you. I think it's on. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Rep. Baker, members of the committee. My name is Katie Erker-Lynch. I'm the Executive Director of Promo, and I'm asking you to vote no on HB 1933. At Promo, our mission is to confront systemic inequities, to liberate the full spectrum of the LGBTQ plus community from discrimination and oppression. With that in mind, we strongly encourage and support the teaching of the struggle for civil rights and the teaching of critical thinking skills. Unfortunately, the examples for curriculum laid out in subsection 3 misrepresent the struggle for racial equality in the United States. The tone of the legislation is that the struggle for civil rights and equity is in the past. This is an offensive idea and insulting to the intelligence of anyone listening to the news or reading newspapers. It's also insulting to the hard work of racial equity advocates fighting for justice in these very halls. If discrimination were in the past, promo would no longer need to exist. As you consider recommending an accurate picture of the ongoing struggle for civil rights, I do hope that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. remains a prominent feature. In addition, I hope students will learn about the leadership of Bayard Rustin, Marsha Johnson, Angela Davis, Sylvia Rivera, and many more, because as we all know, students need to see themselves reflected in the curriculum. I'm going to tell you a little bit about those folks as we consider what kind of recommendations you all might make. Bayard Rustin was a civil rights organizer and activist, best known for his work as advisor to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and as the primary organizer of the March on Washington in 1963. Throughout his life, Rustin was engaged in several pacifist groups and early civil rights protest with a particular passion for nonviolent resistance. Due to his high-level status as an organizing figure, he was arrested several times for civil disobedience, as well as for being a gay black man. Despite this, he never stopped fighting for equality for Black and LGBTQ+ people. He also sought to bring both the worlds of queer resistance and racial justice together, being the first person to bring the AIDS crisis to the attention of the NAACP in 1987. That same year, Bayard Rustin passed away, just 4 days prior to the 24th anniversary of the March on Washington. For folks who don't know about Marsha P. Johnson, she was a Black trans woman who was a force behind the Stonewall riots and surrounding activism that sparked a new phase of the LGBTQ+ movement in 1969. Marsha P. Johnson is one of the most venerated icons in LGBTQ+ history and has been celebrated in a series of books, documentaries, and films. Her actions and words continue to inspire trans activism and resistance and will continue to do so well into the future. Angela Davis is a Black political activist, academic, and author who also identifies as a lesbian. Her work continues to focus on the intersections of race, gender, and economic justice. She first emerged as a leader within the Black Panther Party in the 1960s and continues to work today as an intellectual on the front lines and in the intersections of racial, gender, and class justice movements. Lastly, Sylvia Rivera is one of the most notable Stonewall veterans and fierce trans activists of the late 20th century. Sylvia refused to accept conformity to the status quo, constantly calling out the mainstream gay rights movement for being complacent in perpetuating systems that continued to specifically disenfranchise people of color. The most popular video of Rivera is her fiery speech at the New York City Christopher Street Liberation Day rally in 1973, where she stressed the criticality of supporting trans people, people of color, and low-income people, particularly those who are in jail or experiencing housing instability. Sylvia continued to be an important player in trans activism until she passed away in 2002. As you all consider what recommendations to make, I want to lift up the civil rights leaders of past and present. Thank you, Chairman, thank you, Rep. Baker, and members of the committee for accepting Promo's testimony as we urge you to vote no on HB 1933.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone here who has a question? Yes, please proceed, Representative Nirenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment. I would like to thank you for your testimony today. One of the things when I read this, that I also had concerns that our greatest struggles are in the past. And what you said so eloquently today is how important it is that we recognize the ongoing struggles. Civil rights and the fight for civil rights didn't end in 1968. One of the things that I think has been really eye-opening to me has been how gravely we've attacked the LGBTQ community. I think a lot of us are watching in horror at what's happening in the Ukraine right now. But one of the things that we saw a decade ago was Putin's push to really take down the LGBT community in every means possible. And that is so important that we recognize what was happening there is happening today in our own country. And so it's really important to recognize while all of these things that are listed here in Section 3, I think can be taught and should be taught, but that this, and when we iterate that only these things, I'm not saying that it's limiting that only these things shall be taught, but however, not mentioning all the ongoing struggles, I think really diminishes our understanding that we are still fighting to form the more perfect union. So I really appreciate you coming here and sharing those with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation today. Thank you for coming down.
Thank you.
Any further witnesses in opposition to the bill? Please come forward.
Good morning. My name is Linda Usselman. I'm speaking as an individual, but I also am a history teacher in Webb City, and I am up here with a student today who's being honored with the Breckenridge Scholar Program. But anyhow, when I was reading this bill, my question in opposition is not that we should not be teaching civil rights, because we do teach civil rights throughout our curriculum at multiple time periods in different time periods in history. My question is, why is Missouri going to spend $44,600 to create a lesson plan on something that we are already doing? Civil rights is in our curriculum. The examples here, this is a conglomeration bill of content that should be taught across multiple content areas. For example, the Holocaust is taught during the World War II unit in U.S. history and world history. The Civil Rights era with Dr. Martin Luther King, we talk about that during our 1950s and 60s in our Civil Rights unit. We also talk about the civil rights struggle, the Jim Crow laws and things like that during our Reconstruction unit. Now the Armenian genocide and the Uyghurs, what's going on there, those are to be taught in world history during those time periods when we're teaching about those regions of the world. So it's not that these are not being taught, and it really bothers me when people write legislation without looking at our standards and seeing what we're teaching in the classroom. When we're already doing it, why do we need a law to do it? The curriculum standards are there where you can see them. And what we teach in the classroom is out there on our social sites and on our digital platforms. Everything I teach in the classroom is up on the Canvas page. Parents have access to it. They see all the lesson plans that we do. So I just really have concerns when people make legislation that's going to cost the taxpayers money, and I'm very much about fiscal responsibility, and for something that we're already doing it. So why would we do this? So that's my reasoning. That's my reason for speaking. We need to watch our money, and if you're going to have $44,000, Dr. Rossetti would love to have it in Webb City.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for coming down today, Linda.
Thank you.
Further witnesses in opposition to the bill, please come forward.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Connor Lewert with the Jones Advocacy Group, and I'm testifying on behalf of the Missouri State Conference of the NAACP. I don't want to waste anybody's time because pretty much everything that I had planned to say has already been covered. So we are just opposed to this bill because by putting a limited definition into the statute, it makes it more difficult for the curriculum standard committees to put together things that are more broadly covering the topic. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. Next witness in opposition to the bill. Seeing none, anyone here to testify for informational purposes? Seeing none, anyone else to testify in favor of the bill? Seeing none, that will conclude the hearing for House Bill 1933, and I will turn it back over to Chairman Basie.
Thank you, Representative Baker. We'll now continue the public hearing with our last bill, and that is Representative Baker's House Bill 2292. Proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't take long. This is a bill that we have heard on several occasions in this committee and debated on the floor several times. Had Senate hearings on this bill as well. It's been passed out of the Senate committee at least once, and another version of this bill passed out of the Senate, Senator Carla May's bill last year. And through the House as well, and just about got across the finish line were it not for what happened the last day last year. And I won't go into that, but basically House Bill 2292 allows school districts to offer the Bible as a full elective course. And the reasoning behind that is a lot of things that we have discussed before, but just biblical literacy. Basic functioning knowledge of the understanding, especially of the historical value when it comes to our founding documents, essential to understanding a lot about our society, how it works, how it's different from others. It's a great source when it comes to the arts, to history, philosophy, governmental structures in our society that we have preserved and available as well, and to study in modern times. So overall, I believe we need to allow students the constitutional right to a well-rounded education, and I believe it's essential to a good education. And we need to make it clear that the Bible can be used as an academic study in our public schools by passing House Bill 2292. With that, I would be open to any questions.
Thank you, Representative Baker. We spoke yesterday briefly about this, about Senator May's advancing this same legislation she had last year. Is that correct?
Yes, and this language is a mirror of Senator May's language this year that she has filed in the Senate. My bill, the last couple times, had a slight difference in it that it did specify from a historical perspective. That is not in this language. This is the mirror bill from the Senate.
And this is still an elective, right? It's
That's
not being
correct.
forced if it were to pass. Okay, thank you. Any questions for this Representative Durban?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Are you willing to open this up to amend your legislation that, well, let me preface it by saying this. My understanding is that, how things are written currently, essentially any text could be used as essentially an elective. So are you opening, with the understanding that we're putting this in statute, are you open to amending it to allow any religious text to be used?
No.
An elective.
This is a debate we've had several of the times we've had this in committee and on the floor. And my argument on that is that there's no other religious book that has had the amount of influence on our founding documents and our history than the Bible. And, that's kind of my argument on that. I think many of the other books have value when it comes to comparative religions, and we can do that currently in schools. And really, I think, according to our statute, we could have what I'm doing here, but it's just kind of ambiguous in the statute, and I want to make it clear so that schools know for sure that they can do that and that it is constitutional and allowed. And so that's kind of what this bill does.
Okay. And I guess just to respond to that, and I understand that this has been, before committees many years before I was even here, but again, with the understanding that most likely this can be done now in that elective course or just, taking an excerpt and analyzing it. My concern, again, is when we put only the Bible in there and not spell out other religious texts, I think it's really important that we just open it to any religious text. With the understanding of how diverse our state is, how diverse our country is. And our country wasn't just founded with only people who read the Bible, right? And so I think that's really important to acknowledge. So I will be offering an amendment, and I think we can have that conversation more during executive session. But again, recognizing and really celebrating that diversity is what makes us great. And if we want to spell out the Bible, then I think it's important just to simply be any religious text. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the bill sponsor? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone here in support of House Bill 2211, or excuse me, the bill number 2292, pardon me. Anyone here in opposition to House Bill 2292?
My name is Brian Kaler. I am the editor-in-chief of Word and Way, a Christian magazine publishing in Missouri since 1896, and I'm also associate director of ChurchNet, which is a statewide Baptist network of churches. And I oppose House Bill 2292 not because I do not care about the Bible, but precisely because I, as a Baptist minister, view the Bible as sacred, and I think this particularly has some problematic church-state implications. I'm not going to go through my whole testimony. I've sat here in this committee before, and I also put it online as well. And so I would encourage you to take a look at that if you don't remember or didn't hear my previous arguments on this. But I do think that in three different ways, as I put in that testimony, that this is the state choosing winners and losers when it comes to religion, and I think that's pretty problematic. And if we're really interested in teaching the Bible in a constitutional way, that can already be done. We don't need this legislation to accomplish that. We had a resolution that passed, both the House and the Senate, concurrent resolution a few years ago, encouraging schools to do this because they already can. And so because we had that resolution and because we already have constitutional protections, we don't actually need this legislation. I think what we're going to see, though, is this bill is going to create potential problems like we're seeing in Tennessee. This is something I haven't testified in previous years because it just happened in February. There's going to be litigation happening because of a class from a bill like this in Tennessee where a teacher is now accused of anti-Semitism and other remarks in the classroom. It's going to be expensive for that school district, and I think that's going to open up a whole lot of other problems as well. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'm not going to go through my full testimony with you.
Sir, what did you said the teacher was accused of what again?
Anti-Semitism as well as evangelism as well in the classroom.
All right, I didn't hear that. I just kind of broke out. Any questions for the witness? Thank you, sir, for being here. Next witness or for informational purposes, in support, in opposition. Seeing none, that'll conclude the public hearing on House Bill 2292. And remarkably, we are adjourned.